Alright, so welcome for today's session, the first of part 3 for indirect resource. Now before I proceed on to cover the topic, let's just do a survey, shall we? Just a bit of a survey. How many of you have indirect resource and where is it? Can you just type on the chat if you know what direct resource is. For those who are new to this, direct resource represents the element that produces you. It is the same polarity, and therefore for wood day master, or the rest of you key into the chat just to do a bit of a research, a bit of a survey to see whether there's any element here that we're discussing. Right. And so for the day master, for the wood day master, water would be your resource. Therefore the same polarity would be then yang for yang, yin for yin. How about the rest? So therefore don't indirect wealth, people, just indirect resource, if that's the case. Right. Or perhaps you type wrongly. Anyway, so let's just look into the polarity. Alright, fantastic. To see your indirect resource. So the indirect resource produces. Now again, we have the understanding of the 5 elements. And so it has been a while since we have covered. So let's just do a bit of a quick refresher here before we then move on to today's proper per se. Okay, so we are finishing up into the series of the 10 gods. 3 more to go. Then we will wrap up this particular session. So as we go along, we try to understand that the elements denote our personality. It denotes our viewpoint in life. And as a result, the decisions that we make, the people that we mix, and that shapes somehow the destiny that we experience. And so as we look into the 5 elements, the resource element represents the one that produces. So in a way, it represents parents. It represents parents, mother. It represents mostly mother. And indirect resource today represents stepmother, represents elderly woman, maybe in a way non-maternal, whereby direct resource is maternal, indirect is non-maternal. Okay, so the resource element produces the self. And in a way, as we covered in the last series, we covered the direct resource. Direct resource believes in knowledge. And direct resource believes in proper knowledge. However, direct resource prefers to be rational. In a way, prefers to be scientific. Therefore, direct resource is a belief of proper knowledge. In a way, direct resource is an idealist. So as we cover indirect resource today, we will then cover a pragmatist, not a realist. And therefore, that will be the first to understand the thinking or what represents resource overall. Resource also represents revenue. And so the more resource that you have, the more revenue or sales that when reading for a company has it generates. And today, as we cover indirect resource, we cover, of course, knowledge that is then not proper, but knowledge that is outside of science. Now, if direct resource means science, and science means the study of the natural world, the study of natural phenomena, so of course, as we mostly would know, that students go to school, they learn biology, they learn physics, they learn chemistry. So these are knowledge of science, and science is about the observation of the natural world. And indirect resource is meta-science. And meta-science in our today's parlance is also metaphysics. And metaphysics, of course, means people who are interested in the very topic that we are discussing here. So one thing that brings us all together, perhaps, is indirect resource. You should have it. Otherwise, if you have no indirect resource at all, then actually you wouldn't be joining this particular session today. Because there's no interest, there's no keen look into it. And therefore, indirect resource believes in and interested in the world that is just beyond what is physical. And so that is the first thing that we can contrast about the indirect resource. So many of you would have mentioned that it is in your year, it is in your hour, it could be in your day or whatnot, as it is. So here we do have 4 pillars that are sitting on, there are 4 pillars here that are sitting on indirect resource. And the pillar that we are referring to would be the following. So these are the 4 pillars. The first is your Renshen. That's why they are the poorest of all the rainwater people. The Renshen, sitting on indirect resource. Kim Tae you don't have. Alright, that's very interesting. Alright. Ping Yin, a businessman sitting on indirect resource. Kui Yu, sitting on indirect resource. And Ting Mao, sitting on indirect resource. Well, number 1, here these are the 4 day masters that are sitting on indirect resource. Okay, so let's look into the main characteristics of what indirect resource entails. Let's look into how we can come to it. So indirect resource would be usually interested in non-conventional wisdom, non-conventional knowledge. So their interest lies into the world of unseen. So they're into paranormal, into conspiracy theory, into fraud investigation, into things that are just not the typical standard book. So one can say that if you say that direct resource is book smart, then indirect resource would be street smart. Therefore, indirect resource is all resource people are meant to be intelligent. So resource represents knowledge, it represents intelligence, and so indirect resource represents street smart. So they are more attuned towards EQ. So when we look into direct resource, the people that we saw were scientists like Albert Einstein. So these are the IQ people. And so now these are the EQ people. Not necessarily, but at least they are also quite intelligent ones to say. And the one thing about indirect resource, as you read along in classical Chinese text, the Chinese Pianyin is also in a way known as the owl. And so when you look into classical reading, when you see the word owl, it also means the indirect resource. And in the ancient Confucius times, and later you will see the reading of the text, indirect resource is generally inauspicious. So the first impression is negative, and therefore indirect resource is. And why are they why are they negative? In a way that they are weird, that they are socially inept, and they are not really a team player, and they don't really respect conventional order so easily. Therefore, in Cantonese, Hiu-san, that means the owl, in a way, is depicted from this indirect resource. So they are alone, they enjoy to be introvert. So if you have an indirect resource, of course it depends on where it sits on your natal chart, but generally you are introvert, you are quiet, and you enjoy being yourself. And therefore that is indirect resource for you. So not a team player, definitely not a party animal, a loner, and night owl, like to sleep at night. Stay up late at night. Religious, superstitious. Here superstitious because they are keen, have an interest in metaphysics. Are keen in paranormal. Temperamental. And of course, instead of the proper noblemen, accidental helpers are basically, in a way, that you may sometimes we can call this the guiding angel, the angel that comes and help you at a very last minute kind of area. Therefore, these are also helpful people. People, fantastic. And so where it is, that's all right. Okay, the function of indirect resource, I beg your pardon, there's a bit of a typo. I'll correct it later. So indirect resource. In the one part, the first benefit, of course, is that it will create the self. So creatively support the day master. Therefore, on that account, it is auspicious. On that account, it is positive. The negative part, of course, now will come to the point where the direct resource will weaken the officer. Has it weakened the officer, the weakening process? The more important officer for it to weaken is 7K. So when reading the Pachi for death, because death occurs to a person when all the elements in a natal chart have been completely clashed or combined away. So one by one, as we grow older, one by one our elements will be clashed away and combined away. And as long as your resource is there, as long as your resource remains, then it will control or diminish the 7K. And so that is why people with a lot of resource, the reading is they live longer. And so that's where indirect resource is good. It's good because it weakens the 7K mercilessly. So those are the benefits of the indirect resource. It produces the day master, strengthening, and it diminishes the 7K, preventing accidents, health, and lawsuits. And now the negative aspect of indirect resource. The reason why in the ancient text it is not regarded to be good is that it controls the eating god. And therefore we do have a saying that says the owl steals the food. So the food here will be the eating god, and the owl is the indirect resource. And so the saying would be the owl steals the food, indicating that the indirect resource controls the eating god. And eating god produces wealth, and eating god produces direct wealth. And therefore, by controlling the eating god, it restrains, and then it becomes, it prevents or it denies the person from having the good opportunity to make money. And therefore, that is the one key reason as we see indirect resource. And so that will be the saying, the indirect resource, the owl steals the food. Alright, as you look into it, that's where also it means it steals the indirect resource, because it means as it steals the indirect resource, it would then not allow the eating god to produce. And so that's how we would read the 4 key functions of the indirect resource. Alright, so anyone want to ask questions? Alright, okay, and so here let's take a look into what does it represents now. And so as we read for indirect resource, again we would like to know, or we would like to see what it denotes. And so when it becomes people that you're looking at, it will be mother or a woman, basically non-maternal. As it's non-maternal, it may be a reading for stepmother. Besides, of course, the typical teachers and mentors. And for male, it may be also the grandfather. And therefore, once indirect resource is protruded to the stems, then these are the people that will be more influential to the day master. And for today's topic, it will also include astrologers and astronomers, and of course doctors, healers, and so on. And when it's doctors and healers, It may also be more natural, homeopathic, rather than the Western type, yeah, as it is. And if it is about issues, it would be usually one that is negative. And so for those who draw the pillars to see the reading, especially when instead of using Qimeng to predict, one can also use Pakchi to predict. And when you see indirect resource appearing, usually the reading is negative. So you see indirect resource is negative. Negative in terms of sickness, in terms of monetary loss, in terms of problems, loneliness and solitude. So indirect resource reads solitude, it reads lonely, as it is. But of course, it also would denote that for career advice, it would mean research and development, R&D. It would also mean something that has a very fresh idea. When it comes to objects or activities, it will also indicate, in a way, sometimes for resource, we also call this the seal. And so the indirect seal, sometimes it's also known as the indirect seal. So indirect seal means sometimes forgery, sometimes misrepresentation, fraud. It also represents that indirect resource denote a fraudster, one that is prone to dabble in illegal activities. That could be that. Remember, I'm not saying that this is the day master. I'm saying that when reading for divinity, so when reading for divinity, these are the things that you may consider, especially when you are meeting, especially when the year, the month, or the person comes. Now, if I were to ask you, this year is the year of the wood dragon, Jia Chen. What day master would it be? What day master would it be that would meet indirect resource? What would be the day master for this year? This day master that would meet the Jia wood has an indirect resource. Pink, fantastic, And so if we have a client, if you have somebody that asks you to read and the person is a pink day master, therefore the pink day master meeting Jia is meeting indirect resource. So as it meet indirect resource, then this may be the reading. Maybe a reading that is usually more not negative. Negative indicating exposed to illegal activities, facing money issues, disaster. Therefore, the reading is not so positive. So meeting these particular people. But once again, as we would often know, these are just the first impression. We need to go deeper, to then see what else it is. So for characteristics and attributes, intelligent, new knowledge, interested in new knowledge, interested of course in unconventional form, and therefore for Pink Day Master this year very interested more in metaphysics. Therefore interested in indirect resource. Meeting indirect resource is meeting new knowledge, unconventional thinking, and so on. And it may also be a more lonely, quiet opportunities to be there, so to speak. And of course, if it is in a luck pillar, then the person is more religious and superstitious. This is quite true for those who have indirect resource as your luck pillar. Luck pillar means the 10 years, 10 years in a monastery. So the person may be suddenly when the luck pillar comes, the person increasingly become more interested in spiritual matters. Want to join a nunnery, want to join a monastery, and after the 10 years is over, then the interest wanes, and then the person can leave the monastery and go back to civilian life, something like that. Therefore, meeting indirect resource especially on the 10-year luck pillar, normally means go away from society and be on your own, in that sense, on a spiritual journey, to go into the mountains and hide yourself, be a hermit in a way. Alright, so that would be just the divinity for meeting indirect resource, meeting the life of a hermit, meeting the lonely life. Okay, so of course, reading for places similar, temples, places of worship, clinics, and so on. So either learning institutions or worshipping institutions. Therefore, that would be all the signs for meeting the indirect resource. Okay, so now here let's take a look into what are the key attributes of indirect resource. What do they believe in? Indirect resource believes also, like in the resource, knowledge, but the indirect resource believes in the power of alternate solutions. So creative, strategic solutions are theirs. So the thing about indirect resource people is that they are very, very strong intuition. So intuition means sixth sense. They call it the sixth sense. And so that is why they are very good in metaphysics, because they can read palms, for example. They read faces. They're able to have this sixth sense and to read people a lot better. So therefore, the power of reading people. The power of reading people. They are intelligent. In fact, they're so intelligent that sometimes it becomes on the negative side that they dislike stupid people. They dislike stupid people. Of all the four pillars that really dislike stupid people are the Renshen. The Renshen really, really dislike stupid people. Because Ren water, smart, intelligent, and Ren water is like the ocean. It's like an ocean, and then the Keng metal inside is like a submarine. Therefore, the image of a submarine far below, in the depth of the ocean, alone, solitude, likes to be in his own world, and likes to go and do deep research, and it's just definitely introvert and don't like to be seen, and therefore likes to be on his own, something like that. Alright, so that is really much about the indirect resource. The picture is about the picture, of course, is about them being away from society generally. Not all of them though, as we then later would read more into it. Okay, so anyway, the indirect resource, they are very accepting because they see both sides and they see multiple sides. They are high dimensional thinking. So high dimensional thinking means they see your perspective, they see the other person's perspective, they see everybody's perspective. Therefore, they understand people's better. So they are empathic. So once again, they are good in reading people. They are empathic. They have empathy. They are able to put themselves in your shoes. Therefore, they feel what you feel, see what you see, because they have this very interested in that. Therefore, that will be them, as it is. And because they're able to see more and read more and know more, they are skeptical in life. Therefore, they are not trusting. So when you look into direct resource can be naive. Direct resource is an idealist. Direct resource believes that there can be peace on this earth. People are inherently good. Let's pray for world peace. That will be the direct resource broad viewpoint. Indirect resource, of course, is wake up. There will be wars. There will be always evil people around, and therefore they are able to to set how illegal activities can be done. So that is why indirect resource is very good for fraud detection. They can be good in forensic investigation. They can be good in basically detective work, very good in detective work, because they can think out of the box. In fact, all their thinking is almost outside the box anyway. Very seldom do they think inside the box at all. Therefore, they are so out of the box, they stay outside the box all the time, as it is. Alright, so therefore that will be the indirect resource. And of course, the one problem with indirect resource people is they have too many projects. They have too many projects at the same time. So they are here, there, everywhere. Which also means that they are so interested in things, they will start, but then they may not finish. So they are good starter, but poor finisher. And so sometimes, and resource is always lazy. The more resource that you have, the more comfortable that you are, and the more lazy you become. Therefore, they have intellectual curiosity, but they don't just have the physical energy to finish the job. And because they are also very much in their own world, living their own imaginary world, and sometimes they are very paranoid. Now, for health-related issues, indirect resource in graveyard, of course, denotes mental illness, like those paranoia, those that have a lot of depression and so on. Can they see through a fraudster? Usually, yes. Usually, indirect resource can see through a fraudster. They have this intuition. They have this. They also know how things are done. Because in a way, fraudsters are outside the box. And they don't do things properly, because in a way indirect resource is improper seal. Seal as in the official seal, the official document. So the improper seal indicates that they know how improper seals are done, something like that. Therefore, they are creative in that sense. In the area. All right. So let's take a look into. Again, people sitting. So now once again, let's take a look into natal chart. And here we have Lin Yun. And Lin Yun is China's famous feng shui master. Can you take a chart and see where is indirect resource? Can you see where is indirect resource? Therefore, this is the metal dragon. So in a day master, so sitting on. So therefore, this is the day pillar. Therefore, this is Geng Chen. This is metal dragon. Metal dragon sitting on indirect resource. So this is also another one, and not just that. This is also a Fui Kong, a commander. Therefore, that would be strong. Into that part. Are they prone to getting mental illness when you sit on indirect resource? Not so, unless you find them in death and emptiness. When the pillar is in death and emptiness, or when the indirect resource is in graveyard. So if not, then sitting on indirect resource, they are not immediate. It just means that their life, their keen interest is in the meta science, in the indirect. So therefore, this popular feng shui master is one that's sitting on indirect resource. Alright, we'll take a look into another one, Grandmaster Raymond Lo, which is Hong Kong's very popular feng shui master. So let's take a look into his pillar. Where do we find his indirect resource? Also on the day master, also sitting on the day master. So this is sit. Wait, so therefore this is metal goat, also sitting on indirect resource. Sitting on indirect resource. Right. So sitting on indirect resource is good. It also represents one that is the one that has this particular belief. And so we do find that people they find that quite some feng shui masters, metaphysicians, philosophers, they are the people who are sitting on indirect resource. That comes into mind. Alright, so move along. And now let's take a look into a very popular screenwriter, author, novelist, also very famous because of his young look. And let's take a look into his natal chart, and then you can see where do we find indirect resource. On the day, therefore this would be the day. So again, this again the year stamp. The year stamp represents your fasa. So it represents the first impression that the world or the public sees you. The public sees you. And therefore that will be in a part the mean also. Okay, so of course today's topic is on indirect resource. Therefore our focus, the immediate focus, is to identify where the indirect resource situates. The next thing, now let's come to as we often do, as we read a chart. Now, of course, when we read somebody's chart, we need to look at it holistically. We need to look at it holistically. We have done 6 gods already. So we have looked into 7 killing. We have looked into direct officer, direct wealth. We have looked into many. So therefore, so sooner or later we will begin to see all the interaction. But let's start from the top as usual. The first thing, of course, as we look at the chart, is to identify the strength of the day master. The strength of the day master, the day master's strength. That's always the first thing, isn't it? So let's start off from the top again. So you look into somebody's chart. The first thing is, okay, this is a Yiwood day master. So we're looking into the day master of Yiwood. Alright. And of course the Yiwood is born in the month of the snake. The month of the snake is the peak of is the growth style of your summer. Therefore wood born in summer. That would be a weekday master, isn't it? A weekday master. Can you see whether they are rooting? Is this day master rooted? Is it rooted? So we do find that there is some rooting, and so it's not very weak, but it's rooted. So it's weak, but at least it does have some strength there that you can find. Therefore, you can see the day master is weak with some rooting that can be done, some support. We can also, of course, look into the resource, because wood is needy. Wood is very needy. Wood needs fire, it needs water, it needs earth. And this chart has all of it. It has water, it has fire, it has earth, so it's very good. Therefore, it's generally mildly weak. It's mildly weak. It's not very weak, but it's mildly weak. So therefore, you have seen the strength. Now we look into the season. This day master is born in summer, and we've got a season of summer. So now as we look into its resource is water. So water is also extremely weak itself. So therefore, that's where we can consider that as we look into indirect resource, it is quite weak, as it is. Okay, but then we can see that it has. Now let's look into some of the potential problems that we may want to consider here. It has the indirect resource and the EG. What do we say about this? We'll say the owl steals the food. So the owl steals the food. So that's one thing, that we can consider. And we can also consider that the indirect resource in a way controls the hurting officer. So it also controls the hurting officer. So that's one part we can also consider. Okay, here as you can also of course this is the original text which I have taken, but let's just go down to the meaning. Let's just go down to where we may want to consider where we have the saying that says that the owl steals the food, or you can say that the indirect resource robbing the eating god. Now in this context, what does it mean? What does it mean? So that means where you can identify. So if you have gone along, we can see that indirect resource, we look into the key clash. So one of the key clashes would be indirect resource clashing with the eating god. And so what it denotes, normally what it denotes here is slander, lawsuits, depression, seriously ill. Therefore, that would be most of the time it's a mental anxiety, depression, and so that would be usually the kind of reading when we see the indirect resource countering against eating god. And so therefore, these are some of the things that we can observe. All right, as usual that we would do, we also want to count, and of course I have reminded that you all the time. Usually when we count, do not take it as it is. Do not do a rigid counting. We need to see the grading. The grading of the element is also in the season, the strength of the season. So it's not just mere counting, but it does give you a bit of a heads up into what it denotes. Now here, when we look into indirect resource, and usually in all simplicity, every element that you see, you would prefer it to appear only one time. If you have a peach blossom, one is good, 2 is more than enough, and therefore even hurting officer or indirect resource is the same. And since indirect resource is generally first impression inauspicious, therefore we do not want to see too many. So one is good enough, 2, 3, 4 will have it. And so this is where we would have this counting. So 1 indicates parents, simple. It just 1 is just normal, 1 is good. And later of course we'll see whether it will appear or hidden. 2 means harm. So harm means there will be as it is, slender, mental anxiety, and so on. Now 3 changes ancestors. Now to consider the special reading of what changes ancestors actually means, indicating that these are disown, they disown their ancestors, or they are disown themselves. And usually one way to disown ancestors in the past basically can mean to change religion, because religion is so deeply entrenched in a person's culture and community, and so when one changes religion, it may also mean that the person becomes ostracized and the person can actually move on. Now it may not necessarily be religion, it can also mean change philosophy, change thinking, but whatever it means something that is very deeply entrenched in a cultural belief, something like that. Right, then of course if you have 4 is miserable. If you have 5 means many plans and little execution, means all over the place, all over the place. And when it's 6, calculate every inch of the prison cell. Now usually of course the denotion of calculate every inch of the cell normally means somebody that is perhaps someone who has a very high strong level of in the spectrum, like autism, or basically very paranoid or very focused on very simple minute things in life. Therefore that would be just the way we can say that if there are 6 of them. Alright, and of course has, usually by the time you come to number 7, that would be super vibrant. And super vibrant is very rare and also a very auspicious sign. So in a way, it would also mean a very positive thing here as well. As it is. Okay, but now let's move on to the attributes of the indirect resource, as we now explore what are the favorable attributes. This might be a bit of a repeat from the earlier part. And so indirect resource, their strength lies in their ability to empathize, as they are very sensitive. They are very high sensitivity, able to keep secret, intangible emotions, and of course they have very unique insight into things. In a way, reading for business, usually indirect resource represents intangible assets. So intangible assets are like intellectual property, such as branding, such as patent. So branding, patent, trademarks. These are the reading for how one adds value. How one adds value. So I mean, now let's say for example here, if we come back to this part, and so here, as we can see, this person, Edward Go, essentially he's an author. He's an author and a writer, and therefore also a teen pop popular celebrity. So if you look into all these things, you can see that author of course means copyright. You have you have intellectual property. Your popular means you have branding, and so branding, intellectual property, copyright. So indirect resource would mean making money with this intellectual property or intangible asset has your value, has how you add value to society. So things of the intellectual process that comes into it. So usually their contribution in life is intangible. They are mostly intangible. They don't manufacture, they don't invent, they're not scientists. Scientists are the direct resource, so they add value in this part. And for unfavorable attributes, the reason why they are called the owl, for one reason, is that they are not around people, introverted, suspicious, likes to be alone. And generally those are the are they troublemaker? They're not hurting officer type of troublemaker, so they don't do a Karen on you. So they are mostly just behind the scene, disappear. Maybe you can say that they're more like the hacker. They are more like hackers, and they are more like maybe into if they are ever troublemaker in a way, they are more of the unseen. You can say that they are like the cyber. They'll be more into cyber crime. They'll be more into the unseen type of crime. That means if they steal money, they're not physically there. They're They're not the robber type, but they are the scammer type, in a way. Therefore, that would be their side, using it. Why? Because they are very good. Because the owl is because they are empathic, because they understand how you think. Therefore, they are very good in social engineering, very good in behavioral analysis, and therefore they could write problems as well. If they are unfavorable, they could be there. I mean, as you know today, scamming is such a fantastic, lucrative business. There's enough people in this world who would be gullible enough to fall into your schemes. All you need is just one success and you could making millions out of it. So the indirect resource could play a hand in all those things as well, as it is. Alright, therefore that would be just some of the reading for the indirect resource. Okay, now more about that we come into the meeting part. Let's move along to the next part as we now look into what happens if you find them on the year pillar. Now all these texts that I've taken is also from a more classical text. So again, I warned you earlier that they are more negative in mind, as it is. And therefore, if it falls on the year pillar, this could be something that is more negative. They will be more negative to the day master, because the year pillar represents the day master when they are children. Therefore, if it appears on the stem, it may mean that they are adopted, or that the fathers are not around, or the fathers are just elsewhere. So therefore, it would mean abandoned childhood. So in a way, once again, we have to take everything with a pinch of salt. This is just a very general reading, but it normally means that if it appears, they may have a lonesome childhood. They have a lonesome childhood, a childhood not supported by their parents. So resource normally means comfortable. So for indirect resource is uncomfortable. And in the year pillar on a child, they are lonesome. In fact, the title, the title of the very first work by Edward Gould was titled Loneliness. So he wrote a poem that was published, and that's where he became noticed, and he began to step into this world of writing and publishing and directing movies. He narrated his childhood being difficult and lonely. Therefore, that was his very title of his page itself. Okay, therefore, the lonesome childhood. So please, don't go around telling people, oh, your father will have an affair. I mean, that is a bit too specific, and not necessarily hitting the jackpot. Alright, so anyway, lonesome childhood. That would be just a broader reading for it. Now it comes to the month pillar. And the month pillar represents your career. So the month pillar normally represents where it represents entering into society. So we normally consider entering into society. Where the month pillar is your career and meeting many people, it can be called fake nobleman. So indicating that it is usually not considered to be auspicious. But again, these readings are very old. In today's world, we may consider that indirect resource are resourceful people, but they tend to be introverted. So if it is a career advice, it must be a career that is suitable for introverts. A career that is suitable. And in today's 21st century, we have data analysts, programmers. They are all introverts in a way. They work at night. They work behind the scene. They churn out data. And artificial intelligence, AI, in AI industry, intellectual property, trademark, copyright are also all very much the indirect resource reading. And so if we give career advice and you have indirect resource in the month pillar, and then those is where I say, why don't you dabble into AI, programming, or building up intellectual property, patent, research, R&D, R&D. But whatever it is, avoid teamwork. Avoid teamwork, because introvert means they are best to be alone. They are best to focus on their own world without involving too many people. So not the type of team player that you might expect. Let's see this. Okay, for the day pillar, then here, okay, as you read along, once again, just take all these things with a pinch of salt. They are written in very old cultural setting, hundreds years ago, and therefore we may need to give a bit of a modern spin to the reading today. The tendency to marry late. Tendency to marry late because for women, indirect resource weakens the officer. Indirect resource weakens the officer. And for male, the indirect resource controls the output, and the output produces wealth, which produces the wife. Therefore, here, when sitting on indirect resource, they consider that for male or female, there's a tendency to marry late. Why males marry late? Because indirect resource indicating that the element to produce the wife has been controlled. Therefore, they have been denied the ability to meet their future spouses. And of course, for the case of female, that is also a weakening part. Alright, so therefore that's why the reading says tendency to marry late. But we need to explore more to fully understand the circumstance. Here it says that strong day master will have an unattractive spouse. Emotional marriages with twists and turns. Wow, that's very dramatic in a way. Now we wouldn't say that it is an unattractive spouse. Not to say, it is mostly, we can say that it's a dependent spouse. In the today's parlance, it would mean that the spouse is a homemaker. I mean, if you're reading for a male, then chances are the wife, the spouse is a homemaker. So I mean, let's say for example, we can see, okay, that's why I say Ping Yin. If it's a male, this is a businessman. The wife sits at home, Tai, as they call it. Why your wife is a Tai life? Because you're a businessman, reading you sit at home. Renshan, wife is sitting at home as well. Therefore, this would mean that the spouse, and if of course if these are females, likewise there will also be the same reading in a way that if these are female day masters, then chances are the male are homemakers. The male are the one with the homemaker kind of reading. Therefore, that's the reading for it now, so to speak. So please don't go around telling people, oh, your spouse is going to be very unattractive. That's not going to be it. Okay. Alright. Therefore, that will be just to be considered as well. But of course, here depends if it is weak. But again, terms and conditions apply. Be careful. Strong day master. So the opposite would then be the weak day master that comes into it. Alright, now it's coming to the hour pillar. Hour pillar is about investments. Hour pillar is about your product. So it may consider to be your output, your children. So it can be your children, or it can be your investments. Your investments. And here, if indirect resource is in your hour, then it's a bit more like hard to make money. Actually, not so much to say hard to make money, but less interested in making money. Not so keen, because you're more interested in other things. More interested in other pursuits, especially researching knowledge and so on. So that's why it's hard to make money. Hard to make money is also because indirect resource are more detached. They are more detached from money. they are more detached from the materialistic world. Because indirect resource is spiritual, so they rather just wear sackcloth and go up the mountains and meditate. They rather just spend their days in the library, reading books. To them, maybe pursuing a PhD is far more attractive than trying to secure a promotion at work, something like that. And therefore, if they have this indirect resource, they're just detached from chasing after money. So because of that, making money becomes hard. All right, but somehow, of course, it also means that if the day master is strong, then indirect resource could then be denoted to mean participate in illegal activities. So therefore they will dabble into illegal activities into that part. Alright, so these are some of the reading for the indirect resource, whether they are in the hour pillar, day pillar, month or year pillar. So this will be just on the first instant of identifying where the indirect resource is, and then of course next week we will then continue part 2. We'll look into indirect resource in graveyard, in growth star, clashes, combinations, and also when indirect resource meeting the other elements, and how would they fare. So alright, so this is part 1. I'll see you again for next week as we then continue with part 2. Alright, so with this we end our today's session.